Hey moms, it's Laura Ollinger. Welcome to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast.
I want to just state our intention for today. So, what I would like is for any mom who's listening, who's coming in, and they have no idea what they're going to hear today, but I would hope that by the end of our show today, that they just come away with one thing that might be helpful to them as a mom, as a woman, that might be helpful in her life. And I'm so confident that you will be able to provide that one little nugget of wisdom for moms today. So let me backtrack just a little bit. So 30 years ago, Lisa and I met in college as sorority sisters. And here we are today, as adult women with children. And we've hooked up a few years ago, just starting to talk about what we're doing. And I was so interested when I heard what you were doing. And you sent me one of your sermons that you gave at your church about, your body and the love of your body and how that relates in your faith. And so I thought, wow, that's such a great topic. And I was dying to bring you on. And then ever since then, you've kind of blown up with this Facebook group that you have. So I can't wait to hear you explain more about kind of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
So while I was in seminary, I was a chaplain in a hospital, and I ran across this book in the bookstore called Honoring the Body. And I was just drawn to it immediately. And that's really what kind of started everything. So like back in 2002, I was introduced to this beautiful theological way of thinking about our bodies, because everything up until then had intentionally or unintentionally been really dualistic. Like the spirit is good and the body is bad and sinful. And the body is not good unless it's perfect. And so I had this really kind of, for me personally, damaging concept of my own being. And this phrase, honoring the body, was like, what? I need to check this out. And it really just started a whole life-giving trajectory for me. And not only in chaplaincy, but in ministry, but in my whole personal life. And so through the last 20 years, I guess, I have spent quite a bit of time thinking about that theologically, that the body is good. It's not disconnected from the spirit. It's not disconnected from the mind. And just in like small observance, just anywhere, kind of headlines or simple conversation, we so easily disconnect those things. And we want to lift one part of ourselves and shame or critique other parts of ourselves. And so what would it look like, not only as women, but as human beings, and as well as parents, but what would it look like if we allowed ourselves to see blessing in the body, in the mind, and in the spirit, and that we could actually work toward the connectedness that they inherently have with one another. And it is very much resisted in society. It's not something that people feel comfortable with or what to do. So that's kind of been a driving force for how I've gone into doctoral work or ministry or preaching or teaching kids Sunday school or Girl Scouts or raising a family. It's a concept I go back to, and I try to hold myself to it, but it's a challenge. It's hard. It's hard to do.
It does sound hard. So that's what I was going to ask is like, how do you teach that, just first of all, to yourself? And then second of all, to your kids? I know you have 2 girls and a boy, some teenagers, some tweens. And, that's, if it's a hard concept for you as an adult to grasp, then how do you teach that to kids? So I think that's a 2-part question. How did you kind of align these 2 things? Because like, I completely agree. They feel very separate. That's how we're kind of raised in our society, to think of these things as separate, but you've merged them together beautifully. So how did you do that?
I'm still figuring it out every day. But I would say, so I made an intentional decision. My husband and I both made an intentional decision. I mean, I guess I kind of informed him what our intentional decision was going to be when we had kids, that, people have babies and there's oh, what a chunky baby. I was like, let's not really wrap our minds around talking about the physical body of our baby and encouraging let's talk about the health of our baby, and just starting at the beginning, not talking about the body in a way that is critical, or sometimes I lose words.
No, but I think I would love to jump in, because I feel like one of the things that just immediately popped into my head is we always see little girls and we say, oh, they're so cute, they're so pretty. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that people say. Even I do it. I catch myself when one of my daughters looks really cute. I'm like, oh, you look so pretty, right? It's always like our instinct is to go to how we look.
Right.
Instead of, wow, you're looking strong today, or
yes.
Wow, you seem super prepared today, or you seem really on top of things today, or you're, very alert today. Right? All the other little nuances of our kind of physical being.
Of our whole being, right?
Right.
Lots of stuff makes up who we are.
Right. We're a whole complete person. And so that's why I love how you and I intersect together, because as a teen and parent well-being coach, I'm looking at everything: physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, how these things all intersect to make a whole person. And when I do coach an individual, speak to a group, a workshop, or a large group, and a big audience like this, that's the perspective I'm always taking. And so you're taking a very similar perspective, but we're really focusing on the physical part and this very spiritual part. And so it's amazing how we are just programmed as a society to, like you're saying, from the time they're born, we're looking at their features. We're looking at how cute they are, right? Because that's what we're so excited about as a mom. You can't wait to see your baby, see what it looks like. I always think it's funny when I call a baby it, but you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And so, right. I think that's such a great challenge that you gave to your husband and the two of you as parents together, to kind of notice the other qualities and the other features of your kids. And so that's kind of how you've programmed yourself to think of them in a different way, and probably also yourself in a different way.
It's been a challenge all along, whether or not you're talking to close family or friends. It's just a very typical, it's a societal norm, right? But I noticed even today, I was talking with a dear friend with her baby boy and her toddler little girl, and they were just kind of doing their thing. And I was trying to be very intentional as I interact with the 2-year-old, you are so curious. What a creative little girl you are to want to play hide and seek, not just what a pretty smile you have. Those are great things, but the world is going to give you plenty of that. And so how do we change the conversation to add the other piece that seems to be so missing? And within the church, I would say, and I don't think that this is just for the church or just for the Christian tradition. I think that this is kind of a global thing. Within any community, I think there is a tendency to be very uncomfortable talking about the body in a positive way, because that may just suddenly lead to uncomfortable conversations that people don't think you should have with children or people in other families. And so there's a hesitancy around that, and people have such different concepts of what is okay and not okay. So going into it, thinking about honoring the body, thinking about that with my kids, most of the hard work is the conversations you have just in every day about your own self. So that is really that's where you have to start. That's where I had to start. And I have been very intentional when I've changed eating habits or different things like that. I have multiple sclerosis. And so sometimes I'm really, really intentional on what I'm going to eat, whether it's going to be inflammatory or not inflammatory. Anti-inflammatory foods really help out how my body feels. But I don't ever say I'm going on a diet and I'm going to do this. And my kids, I said, well, mom's got this going on. She's not feeling as well. I'm not feeling as well. And I really need to cut down on the inflammatory food that is probably going to affect you, and the stops we're going to make at Starbucks, and what I want to have in the house. And sometimes perception, even though these aren't language, traditional language that we would have in our house, it's in the world. Well, mom's going on a diet. I'm like, well, mom, I mean, everything we have is a diet, right? What we eat is a diet.
Exactly.
But mom is just paying more attention to her nutrition. So rather than shaming my body because it's not a certain size and I can only eat this because of this, and you need to look like this because every other sixth grader looks like this, or this is the size that the doctor says, like, I just don't have those conversations with my kids. And we work really hard to focus on the fact that I work really hard. I think Zach does too, that they're bright kids. They have a lot going on in their minds. They have hearts full of different feelings. And so along with honoring the body is also not being perfect. So I say that all the time to my kids, especially in the competitive realm of things, but like, perfection is not expected on the field, on the court, in the classroom, in our bodies. Perfect isn't expected. That's not normal. That's not real. And so introducing that theological concept of grace along with the idea of honoring who we are in our body, mind, and spirit, but it has to be modeled. And that's when you've grown up thinking I am supposed to critique my body and not say positive things about myself, which is, I feel like, how the 70s and 80s really was that was my trajectory. There was Weight Watchers and Jane Fonda and all the things, and like, this is what you do. I grew up thinking I'm not enough. And so to suddenly shift as a young adult to like, wait, enough? Like, I'm enough? That's very different. And it's hard. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do. But it takes that intentionality. It takes the vocabulary and the willingness to tell yourself and your friends, and that's part of it too, and that you have that worth, that you are worthy, that you are enough, that you don't have to be XYZ to be a strong individual, to be a person who contributes positivity and beauty to the world, that it's not about what clothes you wear or the car you drive or the size that you wear. It really is the choices we make in the world with our minds and our hearts, and we enact them in our bodies, right? So I don't know, I tend to ramble a little bit.
Well, I'm with you. I'm 100% following your train of thought. And what stuck out to me was, I was wondering, well, how would you communicate that to friends in a positive way? And what I want to backtrack just for a second is, the way I work when I'm coaching a client, people always say what they don't want. As a coach, we're always looking at goals, and they say, I don't want to be stressed. I don't want to have fights with my mom. I don't want to have fights with my teenager. I don't want to be overwhelmed. I don't want to make bad grades. I don't want, right? All the things they don't want. And it's very challenging. I mean, this is the fun part of my job. I say, okay, well, what's the opposite of that? Literally. And it's like they've never even thought of that. And so what I'm steering them towards is the positive version, the flip side. And so they'll always say, I want to feel calm. I want to feel confident. I want to feel able. I want to feel, good, whatever it is that I'm doing. And so as you're talking here, I'm thinking, okay, well, I hear the things like, okay, we don't, growing up, like, oh yes, I remember the Richard Simmons and I remember all that. And it's funny because that's how our minds were programmed, right? And so it's like, well, how do we unwrite a program that's already been written into our subconscious? But not only is it just in ours, but it's in all of society. And then you take it a step higher, which is your area of the spiritual part. And we, for those who are of a Christian faith or any faith background, right? You said they're probably somewhat similar, where we think of the body as something bad or sinful. So as you said that, I'm thinking, well, what is the good version of the body? Like, how is the body good? How can you, I guess the word would be glorify the body. Like, how can it be a positive thing that's not shameful from the Christian perspective, but also like, this is a kind of complicated question. Sorry, it's two things at one time. What is the goal, right? And for you, it's to feel good, to have energy, to be healthy, to be strong. You didn't say that one, but I'm kind of jumping ahead with that one. For me, I know like mental clarity is really big for me. I've got with 4 babies that I've had. I went through a lot of brain fog when my kids were born, and I've worked really hard to make sure everything is, working really well with my body so that I can think in a really clear way and have a good memory, have energy, be able to learn new things. So in your words, like I loved the word you said, grace, and I'm wondering like, how can we translate that to people who might not normally have that word grace in their vocabulary? That might not be a go-to word.
Sure.
So, again, I kind of stacked a bunch on, I apologize, but I'm just trying to like shift people towards what is the positive of all this.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot. And with my ADHD, I want to go down like 20 different little squirrel trails there. So just rein me back in if you need
just
to.
Pick one that you like and go with it.
Well, so grace, I think that's a great question. And that's one that I struggled with for a really long time. I felt like even though I had been to seminary and learned about grace, and seminary is, the school for people who want to learn more about God and maybe be in ministry. So if that's not in your vocabulary, that's what seminary is, just more school. And so when I had gone through seminary, I had grown up in a certain faith tradition. And I think that grace was in the preaching and in the teaching. But I, as a perfectionist, even though I did not do things perfectly, I still had a perfectionist mindset. Mm-hmm. As a perfectionist, thought I was not supposed to have grace. And so this is an interesting, and this is back in the theological, spiritual realm of things, but I was challenged once with the concept of forgiveness. So forgiveness and grace are not exactly the same, but the idea that, well, if you understand God as a creator, a being full of grace and the ability to forgive, you as God's creation, this is very humbling and kind of a put you in your place sort of situation.
Okay.
Why would you then not be able to offer grace to yourself? Are you in a higher judgment than God? Mm-hmm. Why can you not offer forgiveness to yourself? That's not only a level playing field. Well, maybe God can forgive, but I can't forgive. Maybe God can offer me some grace, but I'm not going to allow grace. And grace is that concept of like, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to earn everything. You don't have to win everything. You don't have to excel and be the top of everything. Like, being who you are is good enough. Mm-hmm. Striving to be in the world in a kind and positive way is a really good thing. And when you're not kind and positive, it's okay to recognize I'm not always kind and positive. I messed up. I can make a different choice next time. So it's not taking the opportunity to then berate yourself and shame yourself because of what you did in parenting or what you did in a relationship or how you did or did not set an example. at a school event. It's having grace is saying it's an awareness of, not my best moment. I would like to do things differently next time.
You know what's crazy? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead.
What's crazy as what you're describing to me sounds like growth mindset.
Yeah.
That's how people would call it. That's what we would call it, right? That's what I would call it. So, one thing we really want to get away from is black and white thinking, that all or nothing. Those are, that's an automatic negative thought. And so that's what causes people to live in judgment of themselves. That is what causes people to have low self-worth because they're always beating themselves up. That's what causes people to become perfectionists. You mentioned you have this perfectionist tendency, right? Because you were trying to be enough. You were trying to be the all or nothing, right? You were trying to have the all. And if you didn't have the all, then you weren't good enough, right? There was no gray zone, right? And so the gray zone, I think, is the grace, is what you're saying. And it's saying no matter where you fall on this spectrum, it's okay. You're good enough. You're good enough as you are. Why? Because from your perspective, God made you. A, that should be reason enough.
Right.
And B, you're just here. You're human, right? Like the minute you're born, or, I don't want to get into anything too deep, but, you're enough. You're enough as you are. And so kind of the next thing I want to do is just like keep on this fantastic topic, but like shift it into a little bit of a different lens.
I'm going to pause this conversation with Lisa. If you'd like to hear more, listen to my next episode of The Positively Healthy Mom. Thank you for listening to the Positively Healthy Mom podcast, because there's no manual for the hardest job in the world. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends.